Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. I'm Emmanuel, I'm an Airbus A330 pilot, and welcome to our tutorial series for the iniBuilds Airbus A330 in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024. In this series we are going to fly the Discover Airlines Airbus A330 from Frankfurt to Palma de Mallorca, which is a flight that was operated in the summer of 2022 in the real world on the Airbus A330 due to high demand on the route from Frankfurt to Palma. This flight is going to take us approximately 1 hour and 45 minutes, and in this flight I'm going to teach you everything you need to know in order to operate the best default aircraft available in any flight simulator in the most realistic manner. Join me in the cockpit as we are going to start the preliminary cockpit preparation procedure. The preliminary cockpit preparation is done in order to ensure that the aircraft is safe to operate, that it meets all the required technical standards, and last but not least, in order to prepare ourselves for the upcoming flight. So let's go ahead and start with the preliminary cockpit preparation. The first step of the procedure is to ensure that the aircraft is actually safe to be powered up and safe for everyone around. Now, we start by ensuring a couple of switches are in the correct positions before we apply electrical power. Those are the engine master switches, which are in the off position, the engine start selector is in norm, and the weather radar is off. That means the system switch is in the middle position, the predictive wind shear system is off, and the gain is calibrated, and the mode selector is in the weather plus turbulence position. From there we go up to the landing gear lever, which is down, and both wiper selectors, left and right, are in the off position. Next up, we can start to apply electrical power to the aircraft. Before we do that, we need to check that the voltage of all three batteries is greater than a certain value, which depends on when the aircraft was last electrically powered. If it has not been powered for 6 hours or more, then we will move the switch through from APU to 2 to 1 and ensure that we have more than 25.5 volts. If the aircraft has been powered in the last 6 hours, we need at least 23.5 volts. When you're done with the check, return the switch to the APU position, because the 1 or 2 positions might actually drain power from your batteries. With the correct voltage verified, we can go ahead and turn the 3 battery switches into the auto position, which is going to apply basic power to the aircraft. Now that we have DC power available, we also need AC power. You can see with DC power you only have 2 screens operating over here, the primary flight display and the upper ECAM display. Now, if an external power unit or 2 are connected to the aircraft, we've got the avail lights illuminated here and here, then we can switch the external power on. In case no external power is available, we need to start the APU. Now, to conduct an APU start with the batteries only, we first of all need to run the APU fire test. Now, the APU fire test is done by pressing the test switch up here, but we will come to that a little bit later. In order to monitor the APU start with only the batteries, you can press and hold the APU button on the ECAM control panel in order to get the APU screen to show on the upper ECAM. Since, however, we do have electrical power from the external power units available today, let's go ahead and apply those. External power A and external power B, if available, and this is going to power up the aircraft. It's going to take the aircraft a couple of seconds in order to boot all the computers and for everything to get ready, but we can already make good use of that time. Now that electrical power is available, we want to ensure that we can be reached by either air traffic control or by ground personnel at any given time. In order to do that, let's go ahead and tune our radios. So VHF 1 is normally used for the currently active frequency. On the ground, normally that would be the delivery frequency, in case of Frankfurt 122.035. So you can switch that on like that. Make sure that the volume knob is turned up, so that's off, that's on, and that you have a decent volume selected over here. Likewise, VHF number 2 is normally used for the emergency frequency 1 to 1.5 and or for company frequencies or the Asus frequency. Also, ensure that the VHF receptor is turned on the audio control panel so that you actually hear something coming from here. Last but not least, we also ensure that the intercom is turned on and up at a decent volume so that we can hear any calls from the ground crew in case they are trying to reach us. Last but not least, we don't want to wear the headset for the entire time, so make sure that the loudspeaker button is turned up to a decent volume somewhere around the middle on the glare shield panel up here as well. Now that we are sure that we can be reached by anyone who wants to talk to us, let's go ahead and prepare the aircraft for our boarding and make it a little bit easier for all the crew to work on board the aircraft. The A330 can become pretty hot pretty quick, even in cold weather conditions. So let's go ahead and start up the APU. In general, Airbus recommends that we don't have passengers on board for more than 20 minutes without the APU running. In order to start the APU, we are first of all going to conduct the APU fire test by pressing the test button up here. Ensure that the APU fire switch light and the agent script and discharge lights illuminate, that we hear the continuous repetitive chime, the bing that we are hearing at the moment, and if you find a way to look around while running the test, also ensure that the APU fire warning appears on your ECAM. When the test is complete, release the switch, and now we are safe to start the APU. The APU start is conducted by pressing first the master switch, and then a few seconds later you can press the start switch, and this initiates the APU start sequence, which we can now monitor down here on the ECAM. If you find yourself in a condition where the APU fails to start, for example on a hot and high airport, then in order to increase the APU start performance, Airbus recommends to set the APU start push button switch, that's the one down here, on after the flight crew sets the APU master switch on, but with a 3-minute delay. So in order to increase your start performance, first press the master, wait 3 minutes, and then press the starter. Now, we can monitor our APU starting down here. It is going to take about a minute until the APU has completed its startup process, and once the APU has completed the startup and when the APU avail light shows either on the ECAM or up here on the master switch, then we can immediately turn on the APU bleed. There is no need for any time delay. However, do not use the APU bleed if ground personnel confirms that a low pressure or high pressure ground air unit is connected to the aircraft. In other words, if an air conditioning unit is connected, we are not going to use the APU bleed. Now, when the APU shows avail, as we have right here, APU bleed coming on, and observe that the pack fault lights are going to go out. So, next up, let's go ahead and turn on the ADIRS. So all 3 IR mode selectors are going to go into the nav position, and do note that we always do it in the sequence 1, 2 and 3. Number 2 is located on the right hand side, since that's what powers the first officer's instruments, and number 3 is in the middle, since that powers the backup systems. A complete IRS alignment must be performed before the first flight of the day, when there is a crew change, when the departure airport is located between latitudes 2 degrees north and 2 degrees south, when the GPS is not available and the nav aid coverage is poor on the expected route, or when the GPS is not available and the expected flight time is more than 3 hours. In any other case, a fast IRS alignment must be performed prior to each flight. The fast alignment can be done by switching the IRS to off and then back to nav within 5 seconds. Now that our IRS is powering up, which is going to take at least some 8 minutes, depending on the latitude it can take up to 15 minutes for the IRS to align, we can set up our cockpit lights. In general, I would recommend to have the intake lights turned on, the floodlights, if needed at night, the same goes for the pedestal floodlight down here. One difference between the A320 family and the A330 is that the intake light on the pedestal also controls the lights on the overhead. You will not find a dedicated overhead intake light switch in the A330. You basically only have two intake light switches. One is for the glare shield panel, located down here, and the other one is for the rest of the flight deck, located down here. The floodlight in the Airbus A330 can be a little bit of a pain as well. In general, you've got the dome light control switch over here, and then you actually control the brightness of the dome light with a switch on the right side here. So you've got dim, bright and storm, and the storm position actually turns all the main panel floodlights on as well. However, there is a small gotcha over here. If you're ever wondering why you turn the light on over here but nothing works, there is a second dome light switch located in the back over here. And if that switch is turned in or is moved, then you basically reverse the function of the dome light control switch up here. That's a little gotcha if you're wondering why your dome light seems to operate opposite of what it should. Well, this is probably the reason. Now this concludes our initial power up and setup of the aircraft. Once that is done, we can ensure that our aircraft is ready for service and that we can actually operate the flight that we want to fly. In order to do that, first of all, we are going to start with the electronic flight bag. Now, the main thing we want to do here on the EFB, next to importing the flight, is to go down here onto the takeoff performance calculator, enter your departure runway, so runway 18 in our case today, enter the winds, the expected takeoff weight, which we can get from the flight plan. Today that's 173.8 tons. Let's make that 174. Config 2, air conditioning off, and calculate. The reason we do this so early in the process is we need to know our maximum takeoff weight. And this maximum weight is crucial since the A330 is an aircraft that can easily get performance limited when you're operating at airports such as Johannesburg, which is located at 5,500 feet elevation, or for example Las Vegas, which is only at some 2 and a bit thousand, but with temperatures in excess of 40 degrees. Your maximum takeoff weight is significantly going to go down in those cases, so you definitely want to calculate the max takeoff weight as early as possible in the process, since otherwise you might have to unload cargo or passengers. Now, from here on, when we are already operating in the electronic flight bag, we can also go ahead and prepare our charts. So for that, let's go to Frankfurt, airport charts, and we want the general ground chart. We can clip that to the board over here, and we also want the parking charts that are applicable to our position. So that's the parking stand east for us today. We also want to prepare our departure chart, so runway 18 it is, and we are going to depart via the Aneki departure today, and it is going to be the Aneki to Lima, as we can see on the flight plan down here. So let's go ahead and pin that chart as well. With the electronic flight bag now set up, let's go down into the ECAM once again to ensure our aircraft is ready for service. First things first, we press and hold the recall button for at least 3 seconds. This recalls any malfunction that might have been previously saved on a previous flight. When that is done, we observe that we have sufficient oxygen on board. Now, the minimum quantity is going to vary depending on several conditions. However, in general, if insufficient oxygen is on board, you will get an amber half box around the value. Moving on, we go to the hydraulic page, where we ensure sufficient hydraulic quantity. The quantity is sufficient when the indicator on the left is within the box on the right. You will notice that with varying airplane configuration, for example, with the landing gear retracted, the quantity box is going to move up and down on the actual gauges. Now, this is because the airplane takes into consideration any of the actual configuration, so slats, flaps, spoilers, landing gear, etc., and varies the required box accordingly, so that you can always verify that the actual hydraulic is within what is supposed or expected to be on board at this time. Next we move on to the engine page, and over here we check the engine oil quantity. You will notice that by default the oil quantity is X'd out. In order to be able to see anything over here, we need to manually power the FADEC. We can do that on the aft overhead panel with the guarded switches up here. Engine, FADEC, ground power. Lift the guards and turn the two switches on, and now you will see that your engine's indication are turning green, and you can check the oil quantities down here. In general, you want to see at least a minimum of 8 quarts plus 0.7 per expected flight hour. So, since we are going to do a flight of approximately 2 hours today, we need 8 plus 2 times 0.7, so roughly 9.5 or 9.4 quarts of oil, and as you can see we've got more than sufficient. Now, when the check is over, turn the FADEC off again and be sure to also close the guards again so that you cannot accidentally hit the switch at a later point. Last but not least, we can deselect the engine page and verify on our ECAM that the flaps are in agreement with the flap lever. The ground spoilers are in the retracted position, and now we can check our brake systems. And in order to do that, make sure that the aircraft is on chocks. Then we can release our parking brake, and now we manually apply the brake pedals. And when we do that, we want to observe the pressure rising to at least 1000 psi. Now, when that is done, release the pedals again, and now we can set our parking brake once again. Note that with every application of the pedals and the parking brake, the brake accumulator pressure is going to go down a little bit. Before it reaches the amber indication, which is the point where the parking brake can become ineffective very, very quickly, you can manually recharge the brake pressure. In order to do that, verify that you are clear to pressurize the hydraulics with a ground crew, and then we can go up to the hydraulic panel and turn on the blue electric hydraulic pump. When that is turned on, the brake pressure is going to recharge within a matter of seconds, and then once it is recharged, we can turn the blue electric pump off again. Alright, my friends, this concludes our preliminary cockpit preparation. Now let's go ahead and move out for the walk around, but that is going to be for a dedicated video. Thank you very much for watching. I hope that you have learned something today, and with that, I hope to see you all again on a future video. As always, thank you very much for watching. Be sure to like, comment and subscribe, and if you really love what I'm doing on this channel, I would appreciate a small donation through the Buy Me Coffee link in the video description below. Thank you for watching, and I'm looking forward to see you all again on the next one.